Nancy Smith is filing a federal lawsuit against the Huntsville, Alabama police force, the police chief, and also that municipality after her 17-year-old son was a victim of a drug sting that went awry. Authorities had shown up to his home in plainclothes, and he was allegedly going to sell an undercover individual, not a cop, an 18-year-old that was working with the cops, drugs. And then as soon as he opened the door and there was some words exchanged, we don't know exactly what those words were, the cops allegedly started running toward him. And since they were in plainclothes, the allegation is that he got scared and he started to walk away. Well, when he walked away, the court documents indicate, these are the allegations, that the cops got on top of him, they pepper sprayed him, and they had their knee to his back. And then at one point, there was an allegation that the cops thought that he had swallowed the drugs. Mm-hmm. So they put a sharp object down his throat while he was choking and while he was having difficulty breathing to retrieve the drugs. However, no drugs were found on the scene, and a later autopsy later indicated that there was nothing strange found in his stomach.
Okay, so in a twist here, the case is not yet called a homicide because the cause of death is undetermined. So they're not quite sure how the cops killed him, so they can't say that he was killed. Interesting. Yeah. He remains dead either way. And it's clear that it wasn't like anyone else did anything to him. It was the cops. They came in, they did all the things that we just listed, and then he died. So it is a bizarre excuse for the moment being for them to say, sorry, we can't figure out if it's a homicide. Now, on the issue of drugs, I don't understand why there's any question at all. They found in the autopsy that he had no drugs inside his system.
So that's a really interesting point. And so I looked into it a little further to see what the cops are saying, because if they are trying to justify this sting and they're trying to justify the excessive force that was used in this case, with a 17-year-old who is 6 foot tall and 130 pounds, well, then you got to have something, right? Mm-hmm. And apparently, after the lawsuit was filed, the Alabama Department of Forensic Sciences determined that there were both Ziploc bags of MDMA, also known as ecstasy, which were found on the teen's person. So that's a really interesting development. And also, the autopsy report is not available to the mother. The mother who has filed the lawsuit has asked for the autopsy report, and she's saying that they're refusing to give it to her. And they took a blood sample, but for some reason discarded that blood sample and never tested it to see if he was intoxicated in the first place. Yeah, there were a lot of really weird parts of this story. A lack of investigation.
Honestly, it doesn't sound that weird to me. It sounds like they're just covering it up.
Yeah.
They're trying to, in 18 different ways to cover it up. So let's grant him that there was bags of ecstasy that the kid was holding. And so was that a good reason to stab him in the back of the throat? Like, oh, well, I thought maybe he put it back there. No. First of all, you don't get to put sharp objects and poke his throat because you thought he put it back there. Let's say he did, right? Which in this case, we know definitively that he did not, right? If I'm a cop and the guy swallowed, I'd be really annoyed. I'd be like, oh my, but you know what? We're going to get that evidence out of your body somehow. And I wouldn't think, hey, you know how I should get it? I should stab the back of his throat to try to get it, right?
Oh, it's because they can't wait to use that force. They can't wait to do it. There were several police officers on the scene. By the way, again, plainclothes police officers. So you don't know who they are. You think that they're just random citizens that are assaulting you and beating you. How scary is that situation? And then they go out of their way to not only physically assault him like that, but injure him to the point, severely injure him to the point where he spends 5 days in the hospital and then later dies. For what? For MDMA? Because you think he has drugs? Who gives a shit if he has drugs? Like, that's the cost of this stupid war on drugs. Not only do we waste our resources on arresting people and doing these ridiculous raids, but at the same time, innocent people are losing their lives. And I say he's innocent because who gives a shit if he's doing MDMA? Who cares if he's selling MDMA? Let's freaking regulate that shit. Legalize it, regulate it, and let's move on with our lives.
Is that worth killing a 17-year-old for? Killing a 17-year-old. Look, they continue to say throughout this article that there's a lot of questions here. I just don't think that those questions are that interesting. The cops threw him to the ground, did all these things to him, and he died as a result of the cops' actions. They killed him. End of sentence. So will there be any consequences to the cops? We'll have to see. I'd be surprised if there were, because there almost never is. The one time that I got arrested, same exact thing happened, undercover cops. and they come in and they start yelling at us because they thought we were being loud. Whoa, really dangerous. We were too loud, right? But I'm like, how do I know you're cops? They're like, oh, we're cops. I'm like, all right, great, show me badges, right? They're like, oh, you think you're being smart? And they throw you against the wall. No, I'm not being smart. I don't know that you're a fucking cop. You're undercover, and you don't have a uniform, you don't have a badge, right? And then one of our friends made the audacious mistake of saying that it was racism, not why they were picking on us. Mm-hmm. So what do? Of course, they twist his arm, they slam him against the wall, they handcuff him, they arrest him. When then they open up a door, and then they're about to throw him in. I'm like, dude, man, you have got to show me a badge. We don't know who the fuck you are. And you just arrested this guy for no reason. We just saw it with our own eyes. You got to show me a badge. You know what their answer was? You're under arrest.
And look,
for impeding a police investigation.
And the frustrating part about all of this is not only do innocent people lose their lives, not only is it a case where people start losing their trust in the police force, but you get story after story of these terrible violent acts by police officers, and it totally belittles all the cops out there that don't do the excessive force, that aren't corrupt, that actually do it because they genuinely want to keep cities safe. And I know that those people exist, but they need to fucking get out there and totally denounce this kind of behavior. You don't see it. You don't see it. And look, Jimmy was making that point on the show the other day, and I think that was the one thing he said that I actually did agree with. They never denounce one another whenever there's that kind of behavior.
I never quite thought about it that way. So let me clarify two quick things. First of all, that I was so right on my false arrest that it was expunged from my record. Mm-hmm. I obviously was not guilty. The judge dismissed it and then later expunged it because it was such an outrageous false arrest, right? And by the way, I didn't even have a lawyer. I defended myself and still got that result, okay? Because it was so effing obvious. So now, number two, on this issue of the cops never denounce one another. Isn't it funny that that's what the right wing always says about Muslims? Mm-hmm. Oh, well, after terrorist attacks, you guys never denounce them, which, by the way, is entirely untrue. Every Muslim American group in the country denounces every person involved in every terrorist attack, okay? But they love to throw out that lie anyway, right? Mm-hmm. But in reality, after every police attack, no other police ever denounce them.
Yeah.
Okay,
exactly. So they do look out for one another.
So if it's incredibly rare and they're the bad guys, well, then why don't you denounce them? Why don't you denounce them? Because you're not going to, because you want to protect the bad guys. Because it's more important to you to cover your own ass than it is to serve the citizens, et cetera, et cetera.